Hey there, good people. It's the Crippled Critic, and today I'm here to talk to you about Resident Evil 7, the demo. So, oh man, do I like horror games. I like horror in general, to be honest, but I love horror. I was a big fan of it ever since I was a kid. I was kind of a dark kid growing up, gravitated towards, stories of macabre and stuff like Edgar Allan Poe, and naturally I gravitated towards horror as a genre. As far as video games go, Resident Evil was the first horror game series I ever tried. I tried it when I was 10 years old, I think, the second game at a friend's house, and oh my god, I was so fucking scared. And it wasn't even that scary back then, but I was 10 and I was a big old wuss. But it was, really fun, and it took me a while though, like a few years to actually play it for more than 10 minutes and enjoy it, but it's one of my favorite series, probably second compared to Silent Hill. To me, it always had a really unique style, like campy horror one minute and super creepy atmosphere the next minute. If I had to pick one, I would say Resident Evil 2 was my favorite, only because of the familiar urban environments of Raccoon City. Yeah, they were really unsettling, but I'll go into that in another video. So as a fan of the series, I have noticed it's been through some ups and downs. The last few games were pretty bad. I think the 5 and 6. They kind of focused more on the cover-based shooting and action and not really horror at all. I was happy with their spin-off series, Resident Evil Revelations, which I thought was a happy compromise between local co-op, action with a little bit of creepy atmosphere. I thought it was a huge step in the right direction in my opinion. But this new Resident Evil 7 was supposed to be Capcom's, answer to the critics about how their series hadn't really been going in the horror direction in a long time. And this was sort of their answer to that. I'll be honest, when I first saw the trailer for Resident Evil 7 at E3 this year, I really didn't know what to think. It looked so different than what I expected from a Resident Evil game, and I know that was sort of the point. It looks like Capcom is just starting from scratch when it comes to the series, and which is it's a good thing, but I wasn't sure. It looked like they were just copying popular horror games, but thankfully I'll say once I actually got a hold of the demo and got to play it for myself, my opinion did change a little bit. Yeah, just so you know, the demo is available for anyone to download on PlayStation 4. I didn't really know, and I'm not sure if everyone else knew, but I was actually surprised by that because I was never able to play it on the E3 demo before. But yeah, let me just dive right in. Okay, so you can probably tell that I first looked at the control options for the demo, and actually I was really surprised what they had for a demo for control options. But first, I should probably say just like the game says, it's still in development technically, and some of the features may not work as expected, so fair warning. But anyway, so there's typical subtitles and language changes and brightness, which I know some people might need, especially for a horror game. There's also a bunch of things you can swap, buttons like L1, L2, and R1, R2, L1, R1. That surprised me. The left stick and right stick as well, that's cool. And the dreaded R3 and L3 buttons. Okay, the weirdest feature they added for control options was the aim assist or auto lock, which it's I guess what you'd expect, but for the life of me, I have no idea how it works within the game. This game does not allow for any kind of actual combat, so I really didn't know what they meant by aim assist. I guess maybe when you click on certain items to pick up and look at, maybe it focuses on them a little easier for you. I don't know. It could be a feature they haven't implemented yet, or for the real game, but it was cool. I was happy they had it. I just didn't know how it worked. It made sense if it even was working, but yeah. I'd say Capcom was actually pretty good about their control options in games. Even the travesty that is Resident Evil 6 had a lot of control options, even colorblind options, which was cool. Still, I never really played a demo that had this many options in the controls, so I'm impressed, so cool, good for them. But yeah, pretty basic gameplay, looking for objects and searching through cabinets and stuff, finding clues. Not too many jump scares, which I was happy about because I think they're overused a lot in games. There's supposed to be a lot of like different endings for this demo. I haven't really found that. I only played it once, but I guess I appreciate the effort. As far as what happens in the game, you're not actually given much to go on. You wake up in a creepy house and you don't really know what's going on. You're supposed to look around for clues, and not to spoil too much, but eventually you find a video that kind of explains what you're doing here and how you got here and what's going to happen to you next. You eventually meet other characters, and they seem pretty goofy and definitely expendable. Actually, there's a funny joke that some of the characters mention you're a cameraman for some show they're doing on paranormal stuff. Then they mention, they're like, oh, this guy's a new cameraman, I don't really like him, maybe we can get another guy. Which I think is definitely like a meta sort of joke from Capcom saying, like, we might replace the protagonist. And that's sort of what I feel about the whole demo. I think it really is just them testing the waters. You know, if people don't like the way this game goes, then they can just say, oops, no, we're just kidding. No, we're not going to do that at all. And so in case you aren't, you know, sold on this, I don't know if it's, you know, exactly what they're going to do. I gotta say, Capcom really nailed the atmosphere for this game. The lighting is super creepy, the environment, you know, dilapidated houses and really creepy noises. I think the best thing about the soundtrack that I've heard is that you'll hear noises and you won't really know if they're near you or if they're even, you know, in the same room. And that's great, although it does remind me of Silent Hill. And that's sort of the start of where my criticism, you know, is with this game. It's a lot like Silent Hill. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but for Resident Evil, I don't know, I'm kind of torn. I wanted them to reboot the series and make it go back to the horror route, and it seems like that's what they're doing, but they took a lot from PT, the demo that everybody loved, and I loved too. But I guess before I say too much, I will say that, you know, one of the creators of this game has admitted to being, you know, kind of inspired by PT. So I guess that was sort of intentional. I'm not so sure. Maybe this is where Resident Evil should be going. Games like Amnesia and Slender really did influence the gaming industry, especially horror. So I do know this is sort of the trend. I think horror games that do this can do it well. I played a lot, but I personally, I really do like in horror. My kind of horror is when you can kill things that are trying to attack you. I don't really like the sort of run and hide. I mean, running and hiding is fine, but give me a little more to do. So yeah, I'm a little unsure about that. But I gotta admit, if Capcom makes a solid horror game, I will definitely dig it. So as a whole, I did really like playing the game. I'll admit that once I actually got a hold of this game, the demo, I felt a lot better about it. You know, not just looking at the trailer. I'm not exactly sure if this is where Resident Evil should be headed, but as a fan of the series, what I do think is that this desperately needs something new. And what can I say? That new logo with the Roman numerals and the evil part of Resident Evil 7, I mean, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool, Capcom. I gotta give it to you. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. See you later.